Eleanor adjusted her coat as she stepped out of the black cab onto the cobbled street of Covent Garden. Tonight was special. Her son, Daniel, had finally opened his own restaurant after years of dreaming and planning. She had poured her savings into this venture, believing in his talent and determination. Inside, the restaurant glowed with soft golden lights, polished oak tables, and the faint aroma of rosemary and roasted lamb drifting through the air. Friends of Eleanor joined her, their faces lighting up as plates of food were served with a flourish. Daniel's dishes were exquisite, a blend of traditional British flavors with a modern twist. Laughter filled the room, and for a moment, Eleanor felt a sense of pride and relief. But her joy did not last long. As the evening wound down, Daniel's girlfriend, Isabella, swept across the dining room in a silk dress, her heels clicking sharply against the wooden floor. With a cold smile, she approached Eleanor's table and laid down a folded bill. "This," Isabella announced, "is the cost of your little celebration. £200. Surely you wouldn't expect Daniel to cover it for you and your friends." Eleanor's heart sank. The room fell silent, ice shifting between mother and girlfriend. She forced a polite smile, though her chest tightened with unease. She had expected warmth, perhaps gratitude, not humiliation. Isabella's gaze was sharp, almost daring her to protest. That night, as Eleanor left the restaurant, the chill of the London air felt heavier than usual. For the first time, she wondered if her son's success was being shadowed by someone else's ambition. The following week, Eleanor received an unexpected call from Daniel. His tone was clipped, almost irritated. "Mum, Isabella felt humiliated the other night. You should apologize. She said you acted as if you were entitled to a free meal." Eleanor tightened her grip on the receiver. Her voice, calm but firm, carried the weight of years of sacrifice. "Daniel, I invested my life savings to help you open that restaurant. I bought you a car so you could move freely and focus on your dream. And yet, I am told I must apologize for supporting you." There was a pause, then Daniel sighed. "You do not understand. Isabella is only trying to protect me from being taken advantage of." "Protect him?" Eleanor's chest ached with disbelief. She had been the one to stand by him when banks refused loans, when investors shook their heads, when he nearly gave up. Yet now, his loyalty seemed bound to someone who saw her as an obstacle. That evening, Eleanor sat at her desk, staring at the bank statement. She had added Daniel as a supplementary cardholder years ago, trusting he would use it wisely. Slowly, she took the decision she had been dreading. She rang the bank and instructed them to freeze his access. Her hand trembled as she set the receiver down, but her mind felt strangely clear. The rain tapped against the windows of her townhouse in Kensington. Eleanor whispered to herself, "If this is how it must be, then I shall stand alone." Days later, Eleanor was invited to a family gathering in Surrey. She arrived hoping for reconciliation, but the air in the sitting room was tense from the start. Daniel sat beside Isabella on the velvet sofa, their hands tightly entwined. "Mum," Daniel began, his jaw clenched, "you have embarrassed Isabella again. She told me you froze the card just to humiliate her." Eleanor felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Daniel, that card was meant for emergencies and for the business. Not for handbags and theater tickets. I had no choice." Isabella leaned forward, her eyes glinting. "You are controlling him, Eleanor. You cannot bear the thought of him being free from you. Daniel is building his life, and you stand in the way." The words struck like a knife. Eleanor's lips parted, but before she could respond, her brother-in-law cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. Murmurs rippled through the room. It was as though everyone expected her to bow her head, to accept the accusation without a fight. Daniel's voice grew sharper. "You have always needed to be in control. Maybe Isabella is right. Maybe you cannot stand to see me make my own choices." Eleanor rose to her feet, her palms trembling, though her voice was steady. If asking for respect is control, then yes, perhaps I am guilty. But I will not apologize for protecting what I have worked for. The room was thick with silence. Isabella smirked, satisfied, while Daniel turned his face away. Eleanor's heart thundered in her chest as she left the house. She realized the battle lines had been drawn. The quarrel reached its peak one evening in Daniel's flat overlooking the Thames. Eleanor had come at his request, believing he wanted to mend the rift. But the moment she stepped inside, Isabella's voice cut through the room like glass. "You owe me an apology, Eleanor. You struck Daniel's pride the other night. You slapped him in front of everyone." Eleanor's face burned. "I did no such thing to humiliate him. I reacted out of desperation, because my own son accused me of cruelty. That was never my intention." Daniel's eyes were cold, his arms crossed. "You raised your hand against me. I cannot forgive that unless you apologize to Isabella." The words seemed unreal, echoing in her ears. Apologize to Isabella? For a moment Eleanor felt the walls closing in, her chest tightening with grief. This was no longer the son she had raised, the boy who once ran to her for comfort when storms rattled the windows. Isabella stood tall, lips curved in triumph. "If you cannot give him respect, then you have no place here. Perhaps you should leave us be." The tension in the air was suffocating. Eleanor steadied herself, her voice barely more than a whisper. "If this is what you demand, then I shall give you what you wish." She turned towards the door, her heart aching with every step. The sight of the Thames glittering beneath the night sky felt like a cruel reminder. Even the most steadfast bonds could shatter when poisoned by pride. Weeks passed in silence, until one afternoon Daniel phoned his mother with a stiff request. "Isabella believes we should all meet again. She wants you to cook a proper meal, as a gesture of reconciliation." Eleanor almost laughed at the audacity. Yet something in her heart told her this dinner might be the only chance to open Daniel's eyes. She agreed, though with heavy reluctance. On the chosen evening, Eleanor prepared the dining room of her Kensington townhouse. The long mahogany table gleamed beneath silver candelabras. She spent hours in the kitchen, following Isabella's specific demands to the letter, a 7-course meal including oysters, duck confit, and a chocolate soufflé. The aromas filled the house, though her heart felt strangely hollow. By the time Daniel and Isabella arrived, more than an hour late, the soufflé had begun to sink. Isabella entered with a frown, her perfume trailing behind her like a banner of disdain. "This is what you call dinner," she sneered, inspecting the table. "You should have reheated everything. It looks ruined." Daniel sighed heavily, as though exhausted by his mother's efforts rather than by his girlfriend's cruelty. "Mum, you should have planned better. Isabella is right." The words struck Eleanor like cold water. She had poured herself into every dish, each one a silent plea for the son she remembered. But sitting there, watching them dismiss her labor, she realized the dinner had never been about reconciliation. It was a test, one she was never meant to pass. She sat quietly, her fork untouched, as the candles flickered and the shadows deepened around the table. The next morning, Eleanor received an unexpected knock at her door. It was Daniel, pale and nervous, avoiding her eyes. "Mum, I need to tell you something before you hear it from someone else." His voice cracked under the weight of guilt. Eleanor gestured for him to sit, her hands folding in her lap. "What is it, Daniel?" He swallowed hard. "The car you bought me. I mortgaged it." Isabella needed a purse. "A special one. She said it would prove I was serious about her. The loan was in your name." The words shattered Eleanor's breath. For a moment the room tilted, as if the very walls betrayed her. "You mortgaged the car? Without telling me? For a purse?" Daniel's shoulders hunched. "I thought I could repay it quickly once the restaurant picked up." But Isabella insisted. She said appearances matter. Eleanor's voice trembled, but her eyes blazed. Do you realize what you have done? That car was not just metal and wheels, it was security. It was sacrifice. Before Daniel could respond, Isabella swept into the room, uninvited, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She placed her designer bag, gleaming, extravagant, on the table as though it were a trophy. You see, Eleanor, this is an investment in our future. You should be grateful Daniel is bold enough to stand on his own. Eleanor stared at the bag, then at her son, her heart pounding with betrayal. It was not only the car that had been mortgaged, but the trust between mother and child. The following weekend, Eleanor was summoned to a family meeting at Daniel's restaurant. She arrived to find the long table already filled, Daniel, Isabella, her relatives, and even Eleanor's in-laws. The air was heavy with expectation. Isabella rose first, speaking as though she were the hostess. Eleanor, we've discussed the matter of our future. If Daniel and I are to marry, we need assurances. A prenuptial agreement. You will transfer the townhouse into his name and continue to support the restaurant financially. Eleanor's blood ran cold. You expect me to hand over everything I own? My home. My savings. For what? For love, Isabella replied smoothly, her eyes glittering with triumph. If you truly want Daniel's happiness, you'll do it without hesitation. Daniel remained silent, his gaze fixed on the table, shame flickering across his face yet refusing to challenge Isabella's words. Eleanor's hands tightened on the arm of her chair. What you ask is not love, it is greed dressed in silk. I will not be coerced into signing away my life. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Isabella placed her hand over Daniel's and whispered loudly enough for all to hear, if she refuses, then she refuses you, Daniel. It's her or us. The silence that followed was crushing. Daniel's lips trembled, his indecision tearing at Eleanor's heart. She realized then that the battle was no longer about money, it was about who truly held her son's loyalty. That night, Eleanor returned to her townhouse in Kensington with her decision already carved into her heart. The echoes of Isabella's ultimatum still lingered in her ears, but so too did the silence of Daniel, the silence that condemned him more than any words could. She walked slowly through each room, her hand brushing the banister, the bookshelves, the framed photographs that told the story of her life. Every object seemed to whisper of sacrifice, of years spent building a world that could one day belong to her son. And now, that very son had chosen to gamble it all away. The following morning, Eleanor met with her solicitor. With steady breath, she signed the papers that would sever the last ties. She filed for divorce from the family expectations that had shackled her since her husband's death. The townhouse and her accounts were secured beyond Daniel's reach. When word spread, Isabella wasted no time. She stormed into the restaurant, phone in hand, streaming live to an eager audience. Look at this woman, she shouted, her voice shrill, capturing Eleanor on camera. She abandoned her own son, she hoards her fortune, she left us to suffer. Daniel stood behind her, pale and trembling, unable to stop the humiliation spilling into the world. But Eleanor, for the first time in years, felt no fear. She stepped forward, her voice calm but unyielding. I gave everything I could. But I will not be destroyed for the sake of your greed. This is where it ends. The live stream caught every word. And though scandal rippled through the community, Eleanor walked out of the restaurant with her head high, the cool air of London wrapping around her like a cloak of freedom. She did not look back. For in leaving, she had chosen herself, not the chains of a son blinded by love, nor the poison of a woman who had mistaken wealth for power. She chose to begin again.